Welcome to Season 2 of the Cryptopulse podcast, your ultimate guide to the world of crypto, Bitcoin, and world economics. We're here to guide you through the crypto universe with thought-provoking topics, in-depth knowledge, and information to help you make informed decisions. We'll also be interviewing some of the best minds in the industry, such as CEOs of crypto projects, traders, economists, authors, and development teams from around the globe. And now for the episode.
Hello and welcome back to the Cryptopulse podcast for another one of our epic episodes about crypto and macroeconomics. And today we are discussing privacy coins, Ben.
Yes, we are. Now, a lot of people actually think that Bitcoin is a privacy coin, but for those in the know, you will know that the blockchain is a public ledger and to some degree transactions can be tracked. Privacy coins are a whole group of coins on their own that allow the user to exchange value anonymously and in a way that is not trackable. So we thought this would be a good topic to unpack and pass on some useful information to our listeners.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because non-Bitcoin people and non-crypto people, and they're also on a separate note, there does seem to be that divide happening in the space now. Are you crypto or are you Bitcoin? It's like, okay, that's probably a whole other episode in itself. But people that aren't really in the know still think that Bitcoin is some kind of like dodgy internet coin that can't be tracked, can't be traced, is used for money laundering and all the rest of it, which is so ridiculous. It's difficult to know where to begin when somebody believes that's the case.
I mean, I think there was definitely a campaign out a few years ago, and in fact, it's still ongoing to sort of tarnish the reputation of Bitcoin. And one of the lines which are being pushed through the media is that Bitcoin is used for things like money laundering. It's used by criminals. It's used by gangs. It's used on the dark web. And while some of that is certainly true, there is no coin that is used for crime more than the US dollar. I think, and I actually read a really interesting piece recently that in fact HSBC have been fined more than any other financial institution for laundering money for criminal gangs, far above and beyond even the market cap of Bitcoin. So I think it's important just to sort of apply some context when we talk about these things. I think throughout history, there has never been a form of value exchange that hasn't been used in crime.
I always say to people, yeah, gosh, you're right. On that note, we should probably stop driving cars and we should probably stop using the internet because, you know, the internet is used for crime and that's really bad. So we should just like go back to walking everywhere and having no telecommunications. That's probably better. So we reduce crime. And then they look at me just saying, you sarcastic bugger.
But never had you down as someone that's sarcastic, actually. But
really? So should we talk a little? So we're going to run through some of the technologies behind the coins in from a layman's perspective, because, you know, I am not a techie. You are more so than I, but this isn't a particularly techie podcast. And then we're going to look at some of the privacy coins that are out there. So we're going to look at 4 primarily that are the most popular, and we'll probably leave our favorite, but our most discussed privacy coin until last. Privacy coins are a class of cryptocurrency built on 2 main principles: protecting privacy and ensuring strong data security. Now, while crypto transactions are usually public, privacy coins wrap transactions in layers of additional security to anonymize the transactions and or the identities of each wallet holder. So different privacy coins will use different techniques and technologies to achieve anonymized transactions, but some common methods can include, firstly, a stealth address. So in a typical crypto transaction, the sender uses the recipient's wallet address to send funds. A wallet address is a public address, not to be confused with your keys, which can be tracked. When you use a stealth address, the blockchain records the transaction and enters a proxy address. This is what hides your public address effectively. A stealth address can be created using different protocols and mechanisms within a cryptocurrency wallet if it supports it.
Yeah, another well-known method is ZK SNARKs, which is an acronym for the Zero Knowledge Succinct Non-Interactive Argument of Knowledge. and I can see why they shortened that. It is a cryptographic proof that allows one party to prove it possesses certain information without revealing that information. So this is done via a mathematical proof. The mathematical basis of ZK SNARKs is complex, but proofs of this type allow one party to demonstrate not only that a particular bit of information exists, but also that the party in question has awareness of that information. And this is a technique which is used in the Hedera ecosystem and HBAR. And of course, we had the chat from there come on and talk about ZK SNARKs a while ago.
Yeah, Dr. Lehman Baird. He was an interesting character. That was a really good interview, that one. We'll link to that in the show notes. There was also a very non-famous privacy version of Bitcoin called Bitcoin Private that uses ZK SNARKs. And we've mentioned Bitcoin Private on the show previously.
We have. Yeah.
One of my worst ever crypto investments in more ways than one. But, if you know what we're talking about, then you'll know. Otherwise, we'll probably add that to our worst experiences in crypto over the last 5 years episode.
Absolutely.
Anyway, moving on. Then we also have ring signatures. So a ring signature is a type of digital signature in which a group of possible signers are fused together to produce a distinctive signature that authorizes a transaction. This is like the signing of a check from a joint bank account, but with the added bonus that is computationally infeasible to know who actually signed it from the group.
And a question about why are any of these things important? So someone might need privacy if why might somebody need privacy if they're not doing anything illegal? And it is a good question. It could be a preference or a view of privacy as a basic human right. Cash is largely private and every transaction is not recorded somewhere for all to see with the click of a button. Another problem of the lack of privacy is the exposure of individuals' financial information to bad actors. So hackers and fraudsters can really easily monitor their targets' on-chain transactions and construct fraudulent schemes around the available information. And this is something which I do get asked, why do we need to have privacy coins when Bitcoin doesn't require KYC? Wallet addresses are just a random string of digits and letters. Transaction IDs are a random string of digits and letters. Surely that's anonymous enough. And to some degree, you are right. It does allow you to exchange value in a way that doesn't require you to have a passport or identification or a bank account or residency. And all of those things are great. But the one downside to this is that it is a public ledger and your financial information, if I was to send, for example, Kevin, a transaction to you from my Bitcoin wallet address, you would be then in receipt of my Bitcoin wallet address. You'd be able to take a look at my wallet. You'd be able to see how much Bitcoin I held there. You'd be able to see how I had transacted since the genesis of that wallet. You'd be able to see who I was sending money to. And when you have an open ledger in that way, it doesn't take much for central intelligence agencies to start building tools that sort of out or dox wallet users. And we know that there are companies that are starting to build technology around that. We suspect that at some point, Apple or Google might implement some sort of KYC system into some of these crypto wallet apps. And so it won't be too much of a leap for some of these sort of open public ledgers to have tools built where you can just search the address and see who it belongs to. And I think that, that there is an incentive for governments to sort of do that. So the argument with privacy coins, as we've just discussed, is that this technology will allow for people to transact in an anonymous way. And that really should be, that should be our right. That should be our right. We don't want to be sharing everything about us.
No, I mean, even from so if I'm a business and, I accept Bitcoin or another non-privacy coin as a payment, then all of my customers can see exactly what's in that wallet, and you've got all kinds of security risks, and if you're sensible, you don't hold all of your crypto and Bitcoin in one wallet, and if you've got something that is just like your hodl fund, then you probably want to keep that somewhere else. But it's just way too much information that can be used against you. And we saw with centralized data. We saw recently the list of Celsius investors that was leaked, and that was really worrying. Now, whether that's accurate or not, and I think it was accurate to some extent.
I think it was.
Then that's just such an invasion of privacy. It's nobody else's business. And unfortunately, overzealous and authoritarian governments just kind of say that, oh yeah, well, if you've got nothing to worry about, then you should just, show us everything. It's like, no, absolutely not. We've seen so many times that governments have, suppressed freedoms because somebody's received money from somebody that's maybe has a different political ideology to somebody else. And we've seen it with the Canadian truckers, for example, as well. So it's not just that it happens in developing countries with, let's just say, more corrupt governments. I mean, that's a hell of a statement, but more corrupt governments and more centralized power. But it happens in Western democracies now as well. So privacy coins, I think, are really important. And when you've got countries sanctioning protocols, you kind of realize that this stuff is going to really be required for people that want that privacy and want that access to financial freedom.
Yeah, you're right. I would also say that as politics is becoming more polarizing and the left and the right are typically moving further to the fringes, I think that, you have to be careful about who's creating these sanction policies. And as you rightly said, we saw things with the Canadian truckers that were protesting back during the COVID lockdowns. And it's a really good example because whilst lots of people certainly agreed that bank accounts should have been closed and the truckers shouldn't have been protesting, there was always also an equal number of people on the other side that felt that they had a right to protest. And, Canada is one of the great democracies in the world, or at least it was.
It was.
At least
until
it was.
Had a chic cover.
I'll never forget that interview. But it's people have looked at that and they've decided that there needs to be an alternative now. And we are seeing this, we're seeing this more and more. We seem to be sort of using this line that freedom of speech is not freedom of consequence. And that is right to some degree. I think if somebody says something that is disagreeable, we should be able to respond with speech. We should be able to say, hey, I disagree with that. Let's debate it. Let's air these ideas out. But actually what's happening is that banks are now shutting people out of the banking system. They're closing accounts. PayPal, for example, they've had to backtrack on an enormous faux pas in the last week. I'm sure you will have seen the news, but they released a policy which said that if you were to say anything online which they disagreed with, they could fine you $2,500 or deduct it from your PayPal balance. And you might think, well, if you've said something about PayPal, then absolutely. But this was a blanket policy. This was targeting people that said anything at all on any subject that PayPal didn't like. The backlash, of course, was that the stock was down, I think, 15% before trading hours. They're already down 70% on the year, but it seems like the team there are on a mission to push it to zero. They have since backtracked and they've reversed that policy, and they have apologized and said that it was a mistake. But it is potentially a sign of things to come. And it's, we have a perfect storm at the moment. We have companies that are starting to govern speech. We have a fiat debt spiral, and Bitcoin is great as an uncorruptible, decentralized store of value. But I do see that privacy coins are also going to be quite important as we kind of move through this shift in society.
Yeah, I agree completely with everything you've said. So please don't fine me $2,500. It's just beyond conception, really, that a company like PayPal can create those policies, and I think it's symptomatic of people enforcing their views on other people. And when you're doing that, you're saying you can't disagree with me. It normally means that you're your ideas are subject to scrutiny, and they can, they can and will be challenged, and you should defend those ideas. And a lot of people are saying, well, you're going to trigger my anxiety if you say that I'm wrong. It's like, no, that's just not a good enough excuse, I'm afraid. So
totally.
Should we go on to some of the privacy coins that are on the market? So we've got 4 to talk about. We're going to whiz through these, because if you're listening to the show and you've been in crypto a while, you'll know most of these. But for those that don't know about them, we just kind of want to cover off what they're about and how they work and how they've come to fruition, really. So the first one is Monero, which is probably the biggest one. So XMR is an open source, privacy-oriented cryptocurrency that was launched in 2014. So Monero's blockchain is intentionally configured to be opaque. It makes transaction details like the identity of senders and recipients and the amount of every transaction anonymous by disguising the addresses used by participants. It did this for a long time by using ring signatures, which we mentioned earlier. But in 2018, Monero switched from ring signatures to bullet proofs, which are a type of very efficient zero-knowledge proof. Monero's privacy was so good that the United States IRS had to put a bounty of roughly $625,000 for anyone who could crack its technology. So,
which has not been cracked to date, by the way. I know that.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to go to the government and say I've cracked it, because I think the spotlight would appear. So some of the pros with Monero is the blockchain is very scalable. When the Monero supply runs out, there will be a continuous 0.3 XMR minimum supply to incentivize the miners. I'd like to know a little bit more about that, actually. Maybe we can woo somebody from the XMR team to come on and talk anonymously about what they're doing. And Monero has a mining algorithm that was designed as such that ASICs will not have too much advantage over ordinary computers that are owned by the people, which I quite like. Some of the downsides are that even though it was made ASIC resistant to prevent centralization, 43% of the hash rate of Monero is owned by 3 mining pools. So you've got some aspects of centralization there. Monero transactions are significantly larger than other cryptos like Bitcoin because of the amount of encryption involved, and there's not much digital currency wallet compatibility for Monero, so you're a little bit more limited. Although I think some of the multi-coin wallets that I've seen have Monero options.
Yeah, I think you're right. Now, I know some of our listeners are probably going to say you're talking about the legacy privacy coins, and we kind of are to some degree. These are the ones that have been around for the longest time. These are the sort of big daddies of the crypto world. The second one, which we know people will know, is obviously Zcash. Zcash started as a fork of Bitcoin's code base in 2014, and it was founded by Eli Alessandro, Christina, Matthew Green, Ian Myers, Erin Trommer, and Madars. And they collectively believed that there were security flaws in the way that transactions were tracked through Bitcoin's blockchain. And in their white paper, which they wrote in 2015 outlining their ideas, they called their cryptocurrency Zero Cash. So Zcash uses the ZK Snark security protocol, which ensures that parties involved in a transaction are verified without necessarily revealing any information to each other or the network. The major pros of Zcash are that the coins are much more flexible and effective than loads of other relatively popular crypto coins because they are fungible or completely interchangeable. So coins like BTC, for example, come with a prior records and stamped history. But in Zcash transactions, the previous records have no bearing on its present day efficacy. So like Monero, Zcash is ASIC resistant, doesn't mandate a heavy dependence on expensive hardware and graphic cards. But there are some cons, which is that Zcash can be mined only through CPU mining, meaning it's not as profitable, much more energy, and the project is also run by a centralized business, which is the Electric Coin Company, which is always a bit of a red flag for me.
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, this is one of the most longest standing privacy coins, and I know a lot of say startup privacy projects have used some of the technology from Zcash. So let's move on to Dash, which is probably a little less known, probably in the UK and Europe and maybe the States, but I know this is super popular in South America and Central America. So in 2014, Evan Duffield created Xcoin as a fork of the Bitcoin protocol. This was then rebranded as Darkcoin, which received bad press due to its use on the dark web. Darkcoin on the dark web? Who would have ever thought?
Yeah, shocker.
So in March 2015, it rebranded again with the name Dash, as Dash sort of sounded like a blend of the word digital and the word cash. Very clever. Dash created its own X11 algorithm, which is a modification of the proof of stake algorithm as a way of protecting itself from ASIC mining. It also uses CoinJar mixing to scramble transactions and make privacy possible on its blockchain. Master nodes are computers that host a Dash wallet and vote to make decisions on where funding for the Dash network should be spent. A qualified masternode must stake a bond of 1,000 Dash, have an established IP address, and be able to run for 24 hours a day in exchange for 2 Dash per week. Also, masternodes get paid 45% of every block reward. I remember actually Dash had a foundation and they funded a lot of crypto projects, including a documentary that was made by a team in Bristol. I don't know if you remember that from last season.
Yeah, of course. I think we went to their office just above Mr. Wolves, which at the time was the only bar in Bristol to accept crypto payments for beer. So it became a quick favourite. But yes, they were being funded by the Dash team. And actually, they finished their documentary and it is available to view on Netflix.
Excellent. So some of the pros of Dash is Instant Send is a software for Dash users to make transactions within seconds for a slightly higher fee. Rewards from block development are distributed between the miners, the masternodes, and the funding pool for Dash developments. This gives incentives for masternodes and a large amount of money for Dash developments. And also, democratic voting of the masternodes allows for decentralization with quick decision making in regards to funding developments and community needs. So it's quite well thought out, I think. So some of the downsides for Dash is that there is a controversy over members of the core development team mining 2 million of the 18 million coins for themselves within the first 48 hours of its release. So massive red flag, like that pre-mine.
Love a pre-mine. It's essentially a security, a privacy-focused security.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, I'm sure Gary Gensler will have something to say about that one.
I'm sure.
Critics also claim that a substantial amount of masternodes are owned and operated by the core development team, which casts some doubts over the legitimacy of Dash's decentralized nature. Some of the critical things about Dash's privacy features include claiming that there's nothing more than a coin tumble that can theoretically be traced if somebody possesses the masternodes and that the transaction passes through. So, yeah, it seems to have some drawbacks. Now, this is information that Cal, our producer, has kindly researched for us. So, again, if you're listening from the Dash Foundation or have a little bit more insight into this, then we'd love to talk to you because we always like to set the record straight and provide information that people can make their own informed decisions.
And we did have a note on here to talk about XVG, and I think we can just touch on it a little bit because it's one of the OGs in the crypto space. It's been around for a long time. It's still one of my favorites, and I think probably for all the wrong reasons. I supported them back in 2017 doing a little bit of work on their black paper. I've always loved the way that they work together as a team. But yeah, it's another one of those really good privacy coins. They use the Tor IP obfuscation, which of course is Tor is it's essentially the dark web, I guess. They also use something called multi-algorithm mining. So yeah, we couldn't do a talk on privacy coins without mentioning them. They have a really lovely iOS wallet, which is available to download for most iOS devices. And I think actually mining is also pretty straightforward too, but we didn't have an awful lot of information on it. yeah, we wanted to include it in our list.
And that's purely down to the fact that we try and keep these shows to around 30 minutes to keep everyone's attention. The main reason is that last year, is it last year? Yes, it was, because you had COVID at the time. Yeah, I remember. So last year we did an epic interview with Alex from the Verge team, which went on nearly an hour. So we try and keep these to 30 minutes. Sometimes our guests do like talking, and he's definitely a talker. So what we're going to do is link the interview that we did with him in the show notes so that you can go and listen to that, because we take a real deep dive into the Verge community history, how it's run, how decisions are made, how it works, and what the whole concept and idea is behind it. And I want to leave this one till last because, like you, this is probably one of my favorites. And I think it's one of my favorites purely because of the community that's behind it. We've met a lot of people from the Verge team, and we've had, like I say, Alex on the podcast. We've met a few in person, in real life, not on the web. And we've just been really impressed by that community ethos, and I love the wallet functionality on there as well. And one of the things that Alex said during the interview was that Verge is a little bit like an ATM, so you can take the money out and it's recorded, but you can then go and spend your XVG and you don't have to, like, there's not a record on the blockchain if you make a transaction specifically to, you know, buy a coffee or buy a new car or whatever you're doing. So I think that they've got a really nice balance there. So definitely check out that interview.
Absolutely. Well, I think that kind of concludes our episode on privacy coins. I don't know that we need to add any more.
I don't think so. Just to summarize, I think that there is no perfect solution to privacy coins, and they're always going to come under threat, and governments don't like them. So you need to go and do your own research, but don't be tricked by the masses and the public into thinking that privacy coins are only used for illicit purposes. So until next time, we'll catch you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. It would mean the world to us if you could leave a review wherever you're listening. This really does help and allows other people to find us online. You can keep up to date with new releases of the podcast by subscribing and following us on Twitter or Instagram for the latest crypto-related news. Information provided by Cryptopulse via this podcast, website, social media channels, and any other medium does not constitute financial advice, investment recommendations, or any other type of advice whatsoever. The Cryptopulse team are not professional financial advisors. Trading and purchasing cryptocurrencies do carry risks, and anybody wishing to partake in such activities should seek professional advice.